Hey everybody, so in this lesson we're going to talk about choosing your colors for portrait painting. And once you go through this lesson, or if you've gone through my color mixing courses, you'll say there's nothing different here that I'm teaching you. It all comes down to a limited palette. But going beyond that, I'm going to be going over the colors, and it kind of reinforces that you don't need 300 colors, you don't need 200, 150, or even 20 colors. It narrows it down to between 10 to 13 colors. It's all you need to paint anything in the world. In saying that, you can add in a couple of extra things that are just too difficult to color mix or just take too long to color mix. Those are exceptions. You can add those extra colors in, but you don't need a lot of paint. So for this particular lesson, we're going to be using the DecoArt Traditions. This is their professional line from DecoArt, and I've already got the colors laid out, and if you've watched me before, you know where I'm going with this, but I want to explain. I'm taking kind of the color mixing course that I teach, the challenge, and narrowing it down to just 15 to 20 minutes. So when we're painting portraits, you think of portraits as being more reddish, yellow skin tones, reddish, but there's all different types of skin tones. We can't just think of Caucasian skin. We have to think of black skin, brown skin, red skin, or olive skin. And I don't mean any disrespect to the way I'm naming things. I'm just talking about physical color. Okay, physical color. And if you check some of the old masters, Caucasian skin, some of them, the skin was just so white with a tint of blue. So it all depends on your style. So we're going to be going over in future lessons painting those types of skin tones because it's all based either on your model or on your photograph. So if we go down to the palette, you can see I've got some colors here. And colors, you can think of, well, I'll just need the primaries, the blue and a red and a yellow. Well, which blue, which red, which yellow? Because they only lean two ways on the color wheel. A blue will either be more red or more yellow. A red will either be more blue or more yellow. And a yellow will either be more red or will lean, I'd say blue, it leans towards green. Okay, so you have to kind of think of where they lean on the color wheel. And it's not so much where they're warm or cool, because red, orange, yellow are all warm, and then blue and greens are all cool, but it's where they go on the color wheel, and that's the key, is learning how to read color, where it sits on the color wheel. Because if you've got your colors being all let's say yellowish, your painting is going to be more harmonious. If your painting is more reddish or more bluish, okay, within each of those types, they're going to be more harmonious. So if you were to take let's say a yellowish blue and mix it with a blue or a bluish red, where they're kind of opposite, where they're in the color wheel, it's kind of look funny. But if they all lean towards the same area on the color wheel, it's going to be more harmonious. So let me just show you on the palette. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out some of the colors, and I'm going to add white. And just to let you know that I'm going to be doing future videos of this exercise being done with fluid acrylics, because they're really transparent, with a student quality acrylic and craft paint. Okay, you just don't expect to be using dollar store paint to create a painting that's going to be equivalent to a master, because that's not going to happen. You need to get really good paints with the pigment numbers on them. And I've got lots of information on that on the website about reading the labels on the bottles and the tubes. Okay, so the first one I'm going to start out was green, because I'm just going to go right around a makeshift color wheel. Phthalo green yellow. Phthalo green yellow is just an intense green that leans towards yellow on the color wheel. So if we think, and I'm working my new 2018 color mixing journal, I put the colors here. I don't use all these colors. These are just extra colors depending on the brand that I've brought in. So if you think of, yellow being here, blue being here, red being here. So with yellow being here, a green can only go one of two ways. A green can only go towards blue, or can only go towards yellow. It can't go any other way. So phthalo green yellow leans more towards yellow. Now, why do I have these ones up here? Viridian, different brands, because they make them differently. But Viridian, you can think of Viridian as a weaker version of phthalo green yellow. Whereas phthalo green, I love working either one, the phthalo green yellow or phthalo green blue. Great for landscapes, but for portraits, you don't want it so intense. Viridian might be a better choice. So well, portraits, there's no green in portraits. Well, actually, yes, there is. There is some green in skin tones depending on what you're looking at in your painting or in your model or in your photograph. But not just that, you have to think of the background, clothing they're wearing. Are they at a table sipping a cup of tea? They're all these different things. So although I'm showing all these paints, you may not necessarily need all of them at once. Okay, you may not need them all at once. So phthalo green yellow is going to sit right over here. Pick up a little bit of white so you can see the true underlying color. There we go. So, and I'm hoping you're also doing this along with me, with the paints that you have. And one thing, so when you're getting to do your color mixing, you need to clean your brushes frequently. You could also just use Q-tips to dip. Let me just do phthalo green blue, just to dip into your paint. And then you can just do the same thing with one side, put the paint on. Takes a little bit longer because you want to get it even, and then go to the other side, pick up a little bit of white and just put it in there. So if you don't want to, you know, clean your brushes as often, you can do it that way. Now I'll cap my paints. So phthalo green yellow and phthalo green blue. So greens that lead towards yellow and green that leads towards blue. Pretty straightforward, but why would you need both? Well, because if you're going to make something harmonious, you want to work with, you know, if you're going to pick a green that leans towards yellow, then you know that you can work with the yellows and the oranges and even some of the reds, even though red is opposite of the color wheel. A red also leans towards yellow. A green that leans towards yellow. Well, even though red and green are opposite the color wheel, they're going to be more harmonious versus using a green that leans towards yellow with a red that leans towards blue. That's going to clash. All right, so let's work with the blue now and brush. And so I'm just going to write this down. So phthalo green yellow and phthalo green blue. And although you may be watching this, you need to do the work. So depending on what kind of paint you have, you'll choose the right lesson. But just make sure that you actually do the work, because I can tell you right now, what you're seeing in video and what you see in printed leaflets of color swatches in the art store is not what the paint looks like unless it's physically hand painted. So if you've got color swatches that have physically been hand painted, that's accurate. But watching it through video or through an actual color chart that's been printed on a press, those colors aren't accurate. Especially with watching what we're doing here is all monitors are configured differently, tablets, phones, whatever you're using, they're all configured differently, so you're each going to see the colors differently. So blue. So we have a blue also that leans towards green, which is phthalo blue. I don't use this very often, but as soon as you add the white, can you imagine what you could use this for? A seascape. Phthalo blue is a great alternative to cerulean blue. Cerulean blue can be a very expensive pigment to buy, so phthalo blue, which is it's on the lower end of the cost spectrum, it's a fantastic paint to have, especially if you want to do a lot of seascapes. So where does phthalo blue come into a portrait painting? Let's say you're painting, you know, portrait with the ocean in the background, or you know, you're in a figure painting. So although if you're going to do just a portrait of a face in a diffused background, you may not need phthalo blue, but you know, if you have it, you won't need to go anywhere else, because along with ultramarine blue, which leans towards violet, so now you're going to have a blue that leans towards violet, red, and a blue that's going to go towards green and lean towards yellow. So you're going to have them go both ways. And with that, you'll be able to create a more harmonious painting. There we go. Ultramarine blue. So let's write that down. Phthalo blue and ultramarine blue. So now we're getting into sort of like the warm, the warms. I don't like using warm and cool temperature colors because I don't like working it that way. I like thinking of it as where they lean on the color wheel because it's easier to understand. So as we go through now, we're going to go through the yellows and the reds. If we think of a red is hot. It's a hot color. It's red. But a red can also lean towards blue, and a red can lean towards orange, yellow. All right? So you can have a red that can work really, really well to create violet and to create a chromatic black, which is black with color. For the color that I've chosen for the red is, of course, Alizarin Crimson. Now, this one's a tricky one because Alizarin Crimson, for the paints that I use, the only Alizarin Crimson that I have that's available like this is from Traditions. It's not available for the fluid acrylics. It's not available for the premium acrylics. It's not available. Actually, it's available in Americana, but I don't know how pure it is. It's because Americana paints are all mixes. So for the fluid acrylics and the premium acrylics, I make up my own Alizarin Crimson, and I'll show you how to do that in those videos. But I also have a blog post on how to do that as well. So Alizarin Crimson in its pure form is very fugitive, meaning it fades very quickly. So good paint manufacturers have taken their chemists and their specialists, and they've come up with their own version of an alternative. And DecoArt used PR177 for that. And it's really good. Take a little bit of white so you can see the true underlying color. As soon as you add the white, that's where you see where it leans. So you look at the color, and the first thing is think of, okay, what color is that? It's red. Does it look like it has more blue in it, or does it look like it has more orange in it? Definitely blue. Okay, so now if you want to do a comparison, this red is a red that leans more towards yellow. Can lean towards orange, lean towards yellow. I'm trying to use the actual primary colors, except when it comes to green, because green's a secondary color. So when you look at this, you say, okay, what color is that? It's red. Does it have more blue, or does it have more yellow, or more orange? Orange is easier to see, of course. So that's an easy one. So yeah, so right in the middle between these two, this should actually be over a little bit more. This is a red that's neither blue or neither orange. And those are hard to find. And what I've done is on my cover, it's just pure Naphthol red. But I look at that, and if I had to choose, it's hard to decide depending on the lighting, because I've got some cooler light here, so it's making it look a little bit more blue. But if I were to turn that light off and just use the light that's up here, it would look a little bit more warm. So we will write that down as, I'm just going to put Alizarin Crimson, although it's called Permanent Alizarin Crimson, and Naphthol Red Light. If you're using watercolors, if you're using oils, it's the same principle. This in acrylics or oils could be Cadmium Red Light. This could be called Alizarin Crimson Permanent or Permanent Alizarin Crimson. That's standard, that's standard, that's standard, and that's standard. Okay, so let me just get some of these out of the way now so they're not distracting. And where we're on to next now are the yellows. And some of you say, where's Derelid Yellow? Yeah, I took it out of my palette. It's now going to be a color that I use every, once in a while. It's not something I'm going to use. I'm finding that when I was going through some other painting studies, I was using more the Hansa Yellow Medium and the Hansa Yellow Light. And Hansa Yellow Medium, you could make it more orange with the addition of Naphthol Red Light. So Hansa Yellow Medium, I'm going to put right up here. It's a yellow that leans slightly towards red, slightly. And you won't really notice that until I put down the Hansa Yellow Light. That's where you're going to see it. And this you have to add quite a bit of white so you can see, because it is so light. Now also when you add white to it, white also cools down a little bit. So be careful of that. I didn't add Paranone Orange in here because I'm finding that I don't need to use orange as much, because I can take Hansa Yellow Medium and Naphthol Red Light and make up my own orange. I can make up my own Derelid Yellow. So in saying that, although I'm not putting it out on my palette, if you have it, you can use it. And those colors, you probably can't see on my, everything is reversed on the video. Over there, my paint rack, those colors there that are there, I don't use them all the time in my palette, but they're colors that I pick out that are easier to use than color mixing. For example, cerulean blue. The Tradition Cerulean Blue is fantastic. If I'm going to do a lot of seascape paintings where just using Phthalo Blue is so much mixing. It's just sometimes it's easier just going straight to cerulean blue. Transparent yellow iron oxide, transparent red iron oxide. Love it for mixed media, love it for glazing. Don't use it all the time, but it's a color that I just simply can't easily make up myself. So some of those colors are just going to be much easier to buy, just as long as you buy them with intention, not just because, oh, it looks pretty in the store. Just do it with intention. Because just think, the less paint you have, you can buy better quality paint. So this is Hansa Yellow Light, which is a yellow that has a little bit of green in it. So that's why it's down here. And you can tell quite the difference between these two. Now when I look on the monitor, these look green. All my yellows look, I don't know why it does that. This is the way the monitors are calibrated. And just to let you know that all the paints that I'm using, they are available at any store. I'm not talking about just specifically Traditions. Is that when, you know, if you're not able to buy paints, let's say if you're in an area of the world where you can't, a company, you know, can't ship from the United States, or let's say you're in northern Canada or something where you can't buy anything locally and they won't ship, get what you can, and just to get painting, get to understanding the color, that way you're doing something. That's a lot. I'm hearing that a lot from people, that they just, where they live, they just can't get the paints. You just get what you can. I'd rather you be painting with something than painting with nothing at all, because once you learn how to read color, it's going to be so much easier for you. Now we're getting into the earth tones, so we should go all in here. Yellow oxide. So yellow oxide is a yellowish, is a earth tone yellow that leans towards, well, earth tone yellow. It's an easy one. So that's going to go right here. Transparent yellow iron oxide would go right beside it. Now another color that I'm going to put out, which is a color, raw sienna. Raw sienna I don't use a lot. I could take yellow oxide with a bit of burnt sienna to come up with something like raw sienna. And actually I should put that over here. It's a little bit more orange. And the reason why I'm putting it out is I would call this is my extended palette. It's not a color I use a lot, but there's some skin tones where it's just where they're more bronze. It's nicer than yellow oxide. Yellow oxide is very pale when you add white to it, whereas the raw sienna is a little bit more golden. So again, very inexpensive pigment. Burnt sienna, one of my core colors. I use this, I think, in almost every painting. Burnt sienna is a earth tone that's reddish orange. And transparent red iron oxide would go right beside this. You know what I didn't do? I didn't write down the colors. So we have yellow. Oh, and yellow oxide and yellow ochre, same thing. Raw sienna, Hansa yellow light. Could also be cadmium yellow light. Hansa yellow medium, could also be cadmium yellow medium. Burnt sienna. And the reddish orange, you can find it in a lot of different names. Venetian red, Indian red, English red, all those. And by looking at the pigment numbers on the back, you can see what pigment was actually used to make it. Burnt sienna, neutral. It's good for almost anything. Burnt umber. I don't use it a lot, but there's just some mixes that are just easier to work with burnt umber. Burnt umber is a bit more of a reddish brown. And it's also good to have this when making chromatic black, where burnt sienna is useful when making chromatic black with ultramarine blue, especially when you want it to be a little bit more red. Burnt umber is a little bit more dark. So burnt umber I'm going to put right over here. Looks black. And you know what else I didn't do? I didn't add white. I have to go and do that. I'll do that off camera. When you add white, it takes on a sandy tone. So great for darks, dark, 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 dark. And then we have raw umber. Raw umber is another one that I don't use a lot. It's fantastic though for creating cool tones and for toning a canvas. And I'm going to put that right over here because depending on the brand you're using, it leans a little bit towards, actually should have went here, it leans a little bit towards green, depending on the brand. This one here is pretty neutral. There we go. And I'm going to actually put a little bit more out there to bring that down a little bit more. In its pure form, you could use this as a substitute for black in its pure form. All right, so I added white to the other colors. Now what I want to do is I want to go over the colors very quickly just to do a quick analysis on them to show you why these colors were chosen. Once you learn how to read color of which way they go on the color wheel, you can really narrow down what you need. So for example, so if I go over here, 2 reds, there are so many different reds out there, vermilion, quinacridone red, scarlet red, and cad red medium, cad red deep, cad red light, and all the naphthol red light, naphthol red, naphthol red deep, pearl red, all these. And then when going through the colors, you'll obviously have your own preference. You may prefer, let's say, a scarlet lake or a crimson lake or vermilion. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're going to use the colors you like as long as you know where they sit on the color wheel. So for my purpose for using the traditions is I have chosen naphthol red light that leans towards yellow and my Alizarin Crimson that leans towards blue. Okay, and for my yellow, with the yellows, Derelid yellow, Hansa yellow medium, cad yellow deep, Hansa yellow light, just cadmium yellow, Naples yellow, lemon yellow. The lemon yellow is another one. I'm going to talk about that just in a sec. So with these 2 yellows that I chose, I found that Hansa yellow medium was a really good mix that leans more towards the red, and Derelid yellow sits right here, which is a yellowish orange, but I can make something similar. I found that I was only using it to create sunsets, so not really a need for it. If I have to do something where these 2 colors just don't give me what I want, then I'll go with Derelid yellow. Single pigments will always be more intense than if you take 2 colors and mix them together. But it doesn't really matter. What matters is what you want. Lemon yellow sits way over here. It's a yellow that has a lot more green in it, but you can make it yourself. You don't have to buy it. Just take Hansa yellow light and add a tiny, 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 tiny touch of phthalo green yellow. You can even do it with phthalo green blue. You can even do it with phthalo blue. Tiny, tiny, tiny. The phthalo colors are the most super duper powerful colors out there. And when I'm painting, there's always a comment in there how long it's going to take before I get it all over my clothes, because you just have one little touch and it ends up everywhere. So for this choice, for my 2 yellows, Hansa yellow medium, Hansa yellow light. For my greens, although you don't have to have green, honestly, in your palette, you don't have to have green. I find it nice to have because they're at a lower cost. They're not expensive. So I find that with the phthalo greens, even the phthalo blue, you don't use a lot. It goes really, really far. By taking phthalo green with yellow ochre, or yellow oxide, you create some beautiful greens for trees. With phthalo green and either phthalo green, add it to a little bit of phthalo blue, and you have another color for a seascape. There's so many uses for it, although it is the pigment I don't use a lot. So phthalo green that leans towards yellow, phthalo green that leans towards blue. Easy choice. Phthalo blue is a blue that leans towards green, and ultramarine blue is a blue that leans towards violet. Ultramarine blue is one of my core colors. I use it very frequently. So with this, taking phthalo blue, which is a blue that leans towards green, and phthalo green blue, a green that leans towards blue, these 2 colors work naturally well together. Phthalo green blue with phthalo green yellow, they kind of clash a little bit, but not as much. So you could get away with even using this and this. But there is a definite difference with the 2. Ultramarine Blue, a blue that leans towards violet, makes a phenomenal purple. Makes a phenomenal violet purple, depending on how you want to call it. By taking that and mixing it with Alizarin Crimson. It is amazing. And that's why I don't have dioxazine purple on here anymore. I went years with the same stupid tube of paint. And with oils, I'm still working with oils. I have the same original tube of oil because I just don't like how intense that purple is. If you want to paint something that's super duper intense, go ahead. That's not my style. I prefer to create a violet with ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, because that way I can shift it again. So I can take that violet that's here and then break it down even further by making it a little bit more of a reddish violet by adding alizarin crimson, or make it more of a bluish violet by adding a bit more ultramarine blue. The power of being able to color mix with such few paints is unreal, to the combinations you can come up with and the cost savings, because you're not having to go out and buy a whole bunch of stuff. You are investing time because you need to learn how to read the color. You are investing time, but that will pay off so much as you go on in the future to do your paintings. The neutral burnt sienna is a color, it's a core, and so is yellow oxide. Raw sienna, raw umber, burnt umber. I call those in my extended palette. They're not critical that I use them all the time, but they're handy. I tell you, they are handy. But you can see that these come up with, and you probably can't see. I don't know if you can see. You could use it in its pure form as a substitute for black, but when I look at it, I do see that it does lean towards brown. So for brown eyes, like for my brown eyes, raw umber or even burnt umber would work out really, really well. Also, if you're doing a pet portrait, if you're painting a person with a dog, like a child, a painting of a child with a pet, then yeah, these colors will of course come in handy. And it's not as if you have to have them, because you can make burnt umber by taking ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Problem with that is, although all these earth tones here are opaque, ultramarine blue is semi-transparent, which means the mixture will be more transparent. Whereas, so this and this to make burnt umber will be transparent, or just go right to burnt umber to make it have an opaque color. You can take yellow oxide and hence a yellow medium to create some, hang on, let me think. No, sorry, you can take yellow oxide and burnt sienna to create something like raw sienna, but you're having to really create those mixes. Because raw sienna is lower in cost, I just have it in there. And it's great for painting Shelties, the dog, Shelties, and golden hair by adding a little bit of white or yellow. It makes beautiful hair color, but you can do it as well with yellow oxide. Raw umber, a color that I don't use a lot, but it's great to make it an opaque black that's warm. Black is usually cool, depending on whether you use carbon black, bone black, ivory black, Mars black. They all have these different tones. You can just take a neutral black like carbon black and then just add blue to it if you want to make it blue, or you can add brown to it to make it warm. You don't need to have 4 blacks. You don't need to have that. But raw umber is great pure to make it look like a warm black. It looks nice. But so there you go. So that's the, choosing the colors for portrait painting. But on top of that, don't forget you've got other stuff going around. You've got the background. You've got whether the person's sipping a cup of tea or with a pet, or a pose like this, and there's curtains behind. So having all these extra colors does help. All right. Alternatives that you can use if you do not have some of the colors. So I will say, for a green, you could phthalo green. If you have sap green, again, depending on the manufacturer, because they all mix them themselves, you can have a sap green. That might be okay, because sap green, any of the greens mixing with, well, I wouldn't use phthalo green yellow, but phthalo green blue and alizarin crimson makes a really nice dark. A really nice dark. And we're going to be, that's actually going to be in the actual portrait palette video that I'm going to be doing. Because they're opposites on the color wheel, and because alizarin crimson leads towards blue and phthalo green blue leads towards blue, they're harmonious by nature. If you were to take phthalo green yellow with naphtha red light, phthalo green yellow leans towards yellow, this red leads towards yellow. Would also make another dark color, and be more harmonious. because they both lean the same way. And that's another video that's coming up. This is just about choosing your paints. I lost my train of thought. I absolutely love color mixing. I am addicted to color mixing. I absolutely love it because depending on the lighting, I can do this chart right here under these lights here, and I can go do it over there where I do all my tabletop photography, and it'll be completely different because the lighting is different. But it's a really great way to experiment. But knocking things down. So sap green, viridian is colors that you can use. There is no substitute for ultramarine blue. But there is, Prussian blue. You can try cobalt blue, but you're going to get a completely different shift on those. Ultramarine blue is one of those less expensive paints. Just go with that. You won't go wrong. Alizarin Crimson, again, they're all done by mixes. And I actually have a video on my blog on how to make this by using quinacridone magenta, quinacridone burnt orange, and phthalo green. But those are 2 other colors you have to buy. And I already have them, so I use those for those brands. But if I ever run out of Alizarin Crimson in Traditions, I know how to make it. And to be honest with you, I kind of like the way that I make it a little bit better because I can really shift those colors really beautifully. And I love this red. So substitutes for this, you could, cadmium red light, cadmium yellow, and cadmium colors are toxic if you inhale the particles. So if we did this and you were sanding it and those particles you would inhale, those are toxic, and they're also super duper expensive, really, really expensive, the cadmium colors. They're opaque, they're very intense, so you don't need to use a lot, but why bother? I mean, I've got cadmium colors over there, but I rarely use them. And then the earth tones, the really ones, honestly, if you really want to strip things down, the only one you really need is burnt sienna and yellow oxide. These you can make, but they're so inexpensive. Put them in there if you have them. If you don't have them, you can try doing everything else without them, but they do come in handy when doing painting portraits because you don't want to spend 10 hours of learning just how to make the perfect raw umber if you already have it. You wouldn't need to spend that much time, but you know the point I'm making, right? Time is also worth money. All right, so that's it. So although this went on much longer than I expected, I didn't want you having to feel cheated about not having enough information. So hopefully this will help you, not just with choosing your colors for painting portraits. So the whole goal is picking your 2 reds, your 2 yellows, your 2 greens, your 2 blues, and the earth tones are just by nature. But picking your red, yellow, and blue, and then your green that lean one way and leans the other way. That's the key. That's the key. And that's I'm saying all of that because skin tones are all different. Okay, but if you're only painting one type of skin tone, you can eliminate all these colors depending on what you want to paint. Alrighty, so I will leave you with that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to jump into the private Facebook group, ask your questions there, or even send me an email at artplace.ca. I'm going to be changing, doing a merging between 2 of my websites to make one website because it's easier to tell people where to go. Eventually, it'll just be GiselleGrenier.com. All right, but feel free to jump over, especially into the Facebook group, because we've got a really great crowd in there and everybody's always asking questions and sharing ideas. So some really great tips come up during the process. Alrighty, so hope you enjoyed this and I will see you in the next video. Until then, stay inspired.